All right. Well, welcome all. Thank you for being here for our webinar on opportunities to participate in the 6th National Climate Assessment. My name is Chris Avery, and I am the Chief of Staff for the National Climate Assessment at the U.S. Global Change Research Program, or Washington, D.C., or USGCRP, here in Washington, D.C. Before we get started, I want to draw your attention to the note that will be posted imminently here in the chat box. Microphones are disabled for all participants, but if you have any questions or comments throughout today's session, please enter them in the chat. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact Aaron Grade. You'll see his name in our participant list with tech support next to it, who is our technical support person for today. I would also like to note that all participants are expected to be respectful and considerate toward all the other participants in this event per the USGCRP Code of Conduct. So with that, as we get started in this webinar, I'd like to turn our attention to Dr. Jane Lubchenco, the Deputy Director for Climate and Environment at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, for her opening remarks.
Welcome, and thank you for your interest in the National Climate Assessment, or NCA, our country's preeminent report on climate change, impacts, and responses. I'm Jane Lubchenco, Deputy Director for Climate and Environment in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. I was delighted to have a front row seat for the 5th National Climate Assessment, which was released in November. I was struck by the exceptionally high level of interest and engagement in NCA5 and saw firsthand the power that comes from diverse individuals contributing knowledge, ideas, and passion to an ambitious knowledge assessment led by a talented team. I am here to keep this momentum going as we initiate, ta-da, the 6th National Climate Assessment. Make no mistake, the magnitude and pace of climate change and the consequent destruction and disruption require us to act. Action informed by knowledge is smart action. Smart action can achieve multiple goals, tackling the climate crisis while also creating jobs, stimulating the economy, addressing historic inequities, bringing health benefits, and more. The Biden-Harris administration is taking bold, historic climate action, including delivering unprecedented resources to communities. We know these actions are a down payment on the action that is needed, which is why we need you. Yes, we need you. We need your ideas, your knowledge, your networks, your experiences, and your passion to help provide Americans with robust and timely climate information so that they can evaluate their risks and be smart about actions that they take. Because we want the NCA to be useful, we need users to help identify what they need. We seek community members, planners, economists, scientists, communicators, artists, utility managers, and educators to help with this task. We need everyone at the table as we scope the next climate assessment. So, how can you help? Consider volunteering to be an author or a contributor and help synthesize climate information that will catalyze action. Consider commenting on the prospectus to shape the National Climate Assessment and to help ensure that it meets your needs. Consider encouraging your colleagues to volunteer. The more diverse and robust our contributors and their inputs, the more representative, relatable, useful, usable the 6th NCA will be. We invite you to seize the moment and take advantage of getting in on the ground floor. Help us. But if you aren't quite ready now, rest assured, we will provide multiple engagement and participation opportunities over the next several years. I can't wait to see how the contributions you make, whether as authors or technical contributors or through public comment and workshops, will lead to a strong process and product. and how, in turn, NCA6 will serve you and your communities. Thanks for joining us. I look forward to the next steps.
Thank you, Jane, for your welcoming remarks, and to all of you for being here.
Welcome.
My name is Stacey Aguilar-Peterson, and I am the Acting Director for the 6th National Climate Assessment and the Deputy Director for Research at the U.S. Global Change Research Program. I'll start us off today with an introduction and background of the U.S. Global Change Research Program and the National Climate Assessment. The U.S. Global Change Research Program, or USGCRP, was mandated by Congress in the Global Change Research Act of 1990 to, quote, assist the nation and the world to understand, assess, predict, and respond to human-induced and natural processes of global change. The program convenes federal agencies to advance climate and global change science and to provide useful and usable information to decision makers. That same law that established the program also mandates a periodic scientific assessment known as the National Climate Assessment, or the NCA. The NCA is a quadrennial report that assesses the findings of the program and the broader scientific community, documenting what we know about global change as well as the major uncertainties. The law mandates that the report analyze the effects of global change on several sectors: the natural environment, agriculture, energy, land and water resources, transportation, human health, social systems, and biodiversity. USGCRP is charged with assessing the current trends as well as projections for the next 25 to 100 years. Now let's dive a little further into the details. NCA authors review a large body of scientific research from diverse information sources. They synthesize that information, examine the confidence in our scientific understanding, and evaluate uncertainties. The NCA is designed to be policy relevant. Authors distill their findings into accessible language framed around the risks to people and important resources. That said, the report is strictly not policy prescriptive and does not advocate for particular viewpoints or policy measures. The NCA uses a range of future projections to help decision makers understand the full extent of possible risks that can be avoided or reduced under different scenarios, and leaves it up to the decision maker to ultimately determine their risk threshold. The assessment is compliant with all applicable federal laws and policies, including the Global Change Research Act, as well as other laws that govern things like information quality, accessibility, and transparency. Finally, the report process involves extensive review, including several opportunities for public engagement, a review by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and several government science reviews. To date, the USGCRP has published 5 national climate assessments, the first of which was published in 2001 and most recently in 2023. NCA6 is scheduled for release at the end of 2027, following the quadrennial mandate. All of these reports share certain things in common because they follow the same law. That said, they have also evolved over time in terms of their chapter list and contents, areas of emphasis, management structures, and process. Many of these changes are driven by what we've heard from public feedback over the years. For example, in response to comment, NCA4 evolved to put more emphasis on regional information. NCA5 evolved to add 2 new chapters, one on economics and another on social systems and justice. That brings me to NCA6. We are very excited to launch this process with a public call for feedback and nominations. Before I pass the mic back to Chris to explain more, I want to emphasize why your participation matters so much to the NCA process. First, as you'll see, there are many opportunities to participate in this process, whether you decide to submit public comments, join a workshop, or become a full-fledged author. No matter what, by participating, you are informing the national dialogue around the impacts of climate change in the United States and how the nation is responding. Throughout the development of past NCAs, we have seen public comment result in new chapters, for example, as well as changes to the framing of the report, new chapter content, new authors, new cross-chapter connections, and much more. Second, we want to ensure that this report represents the perspectives and experiences of the American people. Public engagement is critical to this end because it helps us to reach an even broader network than just the authors alone and allows folks to engage at the level that best suits them. And third, it is critical that the report reflects the latest science. By bringing in contributors from a range of disciplines and backgrounds, we hope to create a report that draws from the latest, most pressing, and most inclusive possible scientific basis. Finally, and critically, to be most useful, the report must reflect the needs of our user network, which includes federal, state, local decision makers, tribal leaders, educators, resource managers, science communicators, and many more. Hearing from you throughout the process helps to ensure that the report will be relevant to your work, your needs, and your priorities. And with that in mind, I will now hand it over to Chris to take us through the details of the current opportunity to participate. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Stacy. So as Stacy indicated, NCA6's production process was initiated several months before now with the lead up to this particular launch of this public call for participation. A successful assessment, as Stacy indicated, really relies quite heavily on public engagement. And we're very happy to have this webinar today serve as our first opportunity to launch into that public engagement component of NCA6's development. To kick that off, the way that we have done this is that a Federal Register notice was our initiating event for public engagement for NCA6. This is the first, but it is not the last opportunity for you all to participate. But as the first, it is potentially one of the most initially impactful events for NCA6's launch. Federal Register notices are the tool that we at USGCRP use to distribute official notices to communicate with and solicit information from the public. And the FRN, which the link you see here on the screen, you can also scan the QR code, or if you just go to federalregister.gov and search USGCRP, it will pop up right there. But either way, that FRN has basically 4 components that we are communicating to you all on. And I'm going to go through each of those pieces of the FRN now. There's also now a link directly to the FRN in the chat if you would like to look at that while I'm talking. So in the first section of the FRN, we cover what is likely, I would imagine, one of the more interesting topics of the FRN to you all, which is what we call our draft prospectus. This first major element of the FRN contains both the overarching themes that we anticipate the NCA6 to cover and a proposed framework that we are suggesting the NCA6 could use to develop itself into its final version. So the overarching themes that we anticipate being covered in NCA6 largely address the needs and gaps that have been identified by previous assessments. What's new? How has the science evolved? Those proposed themes are listed here on the screen, and talking through them, the first topic would be identification of advancements or improvements relative to those previous assessments in understanding of human-induced and natural processes of global change and the resulting implications for the United States. Characterization of current and future risks associated with global change, such as including with quantifiable metrics such as indicators and projections where possible, and the needs of different subnational geographies and multiple audiences are kept in mind throughout that whole process. We anticipate a major theme being examining trends and developments in adaptation options and effectiveness of adaptation actions, approaches for monitoring adaptation progress, including, as I said before, indicators and metrics. We're anticipating coverage of further exploration of how people understand the drivers, risks, and impacts of climate change, how changes in climate affect national security, society, and different people or groups of people living within the United States, and how those people behave in response to climate-induced change. We expect it will cover identification of populations living in the US at higher risk of climate impacts, perspectives on equity and environmental justice in connection with domestic mitigation and adaptation actions, exploration of the socioeconomic impacts from those actions, and the role of frontline communities in the country's response to climate change. And we also anticipate that this will cover a better understanding of sources and trends in the United States in global greenhouse gas emissions, new strategies for mitigation, effectiveness of mitigation efforts, and new technology pathways for reaching different emissions targets, the trade-offs in different response options, and potentially any other response-related questions that our authors might identify in supporting decision-making. So with all of those overarching themes, the framework that we anticipate this covering would identify the structure and organization of the assessment itself. And for those of you who are familiar with previous NCAs, this proposed framework will look very similar. It very much closely follows previous NCAs intentionally. There's an overview, some physical science content, national level topic chapters, regional analyses, and response content, including some of the new investments that we undertook in NCA 5, such as our focus boxes and appendices. Additionally, we anticipate updating and including expansions of some of our support tools, such as the NCA Atlas. All of this material, the overarching themes, the proposed framework, all of it is listed in the FRN, and we are requesting feedback from all of you on whether this actually meets the needs of what you're looking for from your stakeholders' perspective. Public feedback at these types of early stages is absolutely critical. We are proposing an idea right now, and changes in focus areas, new chapters, reporting elements, adjusted framings. All of these are things that we are undertaking and considering right now. So for your consideration, some of the crucial questions that we're hoping you'll consider and provide feedback on are things like, are these the right themes that NCA6 should focus on? Would us actually addressing these themes result in an informative and relevant assessment product for your work? Based on the topics you see in the FRN, are there major topics that are missing? Are there themes that you'd like to make sure that are present in the underlying chapters that the authors will ultimately create? So does this overall framework meet the needs and advance the conversation you are participating in climate change? So the link that you see on the slide right here, contribute.globalchange.gov, is your main gateway into the technical system that we have to receive all of these comments through. It's a straightforward system with a lot of directions on how to use it, and I would encourage all of you to capture that link or write it down here. We will provide that link in the chat as well, so make sure you copy that for yourself so that you can access the system to submit your comments on this draft prospectus. The second component of the FRN is our call for authors and contributors. As with previous NCAs, the NCA is largely written by volunteers, experts in their fields who want to spend time helping provide the citizens of the United States this incredible resource of the NCA. So in this FRN, we are calling for nominations for authors and contributors to NCA6. There are multiple different roles with different responsibilities and different levels of commitment. We're seeking contributors from diverse disciplines, career stages, backgrounds. And I'm going to go here in the next couple of slides, some descriptions of what those types of contributor roles and the expertise we're seeking are. So first and foremost, I want to emphasize that the authors and contributors are volunteers. These are volunteer positions for experts in topics related to climate science and global change. The steering committee of NCA6 also recognizes the importance of Indigenous knowledge and the importance of multiple lines of evidence. Indigenous knowledge specifically, its representation in NCA has grown over the years, made possible through things like the increase in the number of Indigenous scholars on chapter teams and changes in source material guidance. Submissions should reflect, the ability to contribute subject matter expertise to the assessment. Submissions are considered for leadership roles, but they must demonstrate experience in leading collaborative teams under deadlines. So being a contributor to is an important service to the United States, but it also provides all of you who participate an opportunity to build your networks and expand your professional connections throughout the climate change community. There are a couple of different ways in which people are able to participate within NCA. There are basically 5 major categories of participation. There are some others, but these are the major ones that we're requesting nominations for here. First and foremost, we have our federal coordinating lead authors who serve as liaisons between chapter teams and federal agencies. This particular role is only open to federal authors, but any federal author is able to throw their hat in the ring. Chapter leads oversee chapter development and manage author teams and the overall writing process for each individual chapter. The chapter authors make up the combined chapter team, and those authors are responsible for compiling research, writing the chapter itself, and developing the content for their specific chapter. In NCA6, we're piloting a new role called the graphics development lead, which is a role that is a chapter author who is also taking on dedicated responsibility to lead and manage the development of the graphics for that particular chapter. The graphics development lead will be tightly connected to USGCRP staff and helping coordinate between staff and scientists and others within their chapter to make sure that the graphics that are developed in support of the chapter are just as outstanding as the text itself and highly usable to the ultimate users of the report. And finally, one other role is our technical contributor role. Technical contributors, while not chapter authors, contribute discrete, specific content to the chapter in support of their author work on an as-needed basis. Many different times, technical contributors are brought in to provide expertise on development of an individual graphic, or running a particular model scenario, or looking at particular research bases to compile literature for authors to consider as they're doing their assessment work. So each of these different roles have specific contribution types that they make to the overall report, and all of them are critical contributors to the report itself. You're allowed to nominate yourself for more than one role at a time. You can nominate yourself for all or one of them, and all nominations that we received are considered for participation in NCA6. In terms of expertise, there is a differentiation between both topical skills that we seek and operational skills that we seek. And we are seeking people with both or with one or both of these different skill sets. So some key topical areas include things like climate and earth system science expertise, which again speaks directly to some of the requirements in the GCRA that we're required to cover within the NCA, like integrating and interpreting scientific findings, discussing those uncertainties, or analyzing trends. We're looking for sectoral and issue-specific impacts expertise, including things like the social sciences, analyzing effects on the natural environment, and all of those other topical areas that Stacy mentioned in the beginning. We're looking for regional expertise, people who have climate change science expertise, but perhaps is specifically located in their state or their region or their city. We're looking for response expertise, people who have expertise across mitigation, adaptation, resilience, or other types of categories like hazards or climate services. And any other relevant climate services related topic that I'm not specifically mentioning here is also welcome to nominate themselves. We're looking for engineers, planners, architects, finance experts, business experts, nonprofit experts. Prospective authors can nominate themselves for other topics as well that I'm not explicitly calling out here, as long as they're consistent with the GCRA mandate. So if you're interested at all and you have any of these topical expertise areas, I strongly encourage you to nominate yourself. Nominations for skills that would be helpful in development of chapter are also really, really relevant for us. We're writing a report, so being able to write clear and effective scientific writing, especially for a non-technical audience, is hugely valuable. We have this new role of a graphics development lead, so graphic design expertise, such as developing data-focused graphics that are clear and effective, development of infographics, or downscaling modeling visualization are all skill sets that are incredibly valuable to NCA6's development. Team management expertise is highly useful, especially for those operating the leadership roles of NCA6. And the ability to oversee the work of multiple technical experts to a central project is itself a critical skill. And we hope to bring in people who nominate themselves who have that type of experience. And anyone who's worked in synthesis or assessment projects, especially across multiple research disciplines, or worked across multiple research disciplines in general, are all bringing to the table skills that are highly, highly useful for NCA6. So in terms of the process of nominating yourself, again, the nomination process happens right at our contribute.globalchange.gov site. We are requesting some basic information about each nominee, including their full name, their title, their affiliation, and contact information. We need details from you nominating, even if you're nominating yourself, about your area of expertise, the proposed topics in which that nominee is qualified to contribute to. We request a short description of the nominee's qualifications and perhaps a sentence or two about why they're interested. And we request a current CV or resume as well. All of this material can get submitted through that portal at contribute.globalchange.gov. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out and we can answer them. Our third section of the FRN is our call for technical inputs. The technical inputs are a critical component of NCA6's development. These technical inputs form a baseline from which authors are able to build to understand what knowledge is out there that they're able to assess. NCA6 does not undertake original research. We can only assess the knowledge that already exists in the world. So we rely heavily on public engagement to provide for us any kind of knowledge or any kind of literature that may not be easily knowable or available to the authors without someone submitting it to us. So technical and scientific inputs include, but aren't limited to, obviously formal research papers, but also indigenous knowledge, local knowledge, government reports, nonprofit reports, or other materials that are providable to us to be able to have the authors assess. Early submissions, especially submissions now in this system, are some of the most impactful that we can get because they're provided to the authors right at the start of the whole process. So I encourage anyone who has knowledge of research, especially research that you're knowledgeable about in your technical area, to please submit some of that material through this portal as well. And finally, the fourth section of our FRN is our Notice of Planned Public Engagement. This element of the FRN provides an overview of the planned public engagement opportunities throughout all of NCA6's development process. As I said at the start, NCA6 formally kicked off in early 2024 with the establishment of the federal steering committee that oversees this whole project. And public engagement is done throughout the entire assessment cycle for the next 4 years. In addition to the opportunities we presented here today, there are opportunities to comment on multiple drafts, to continue to submit technical inputs throughout the course of the development of NCA6, to attend workshops and participate in webinars like these, to provide expertise on a specific topic as a technical contributor later on in the process. So the slide that you see here lays out the engagement plan for NCA6 with an approximate timeline. Please understand that the development of NCA6 is happening over a long period of time, and all of these times are subject to change. But based on what we have today, this is when we anticipate each of these public engagement opportunities occurring. There are many opportunities to participate, as you see here, from the earlier stages to later on once the report is more baked. And participation takes on many forms, from serving as a full-fledged author to just joining a workshop or to submitting public comment in written form whenever that opportunity presents itself. This is by design. We want you to participate to the extent that you are both most interested in and available to. We need your input to ensure that this report is broadly representative, that it reflects the latest science, and that it meets the needs of our wide network of users.